We've talked about win probability percentage added on plays before, and in this video, we're going to do it again, seeing as we just had a huge play in the Subway Series that might have been the Mets' most clutch play of the year, but then again, we'll look and analyze at it. This is a game that really went back and forth on the win probability percentage side. We had lots of big plays, but McNeil's go-ahead home run from trailing really is the big play to discuss here. Before that play, the Yankees had a 71.7% chance of winning. That was down to 23.9% after this home run. And that added 47.2 percentage points of win probability for the Mets. And here's why that was so high. When you look at that instance, you see the Mets were behind on 2 out. Mets were behind on 2 out, and they had a walk, so there was a runner on first base. Now, whether or not this was actually supposed to be a walk is debatable, since many would argue that it should have been, a strike, and it looked kind of like a strike. Then again, this was called a strike looking, and I think that is the right call. And then this, also debatable. The umpire actually missed a lot of calls on both sides. So it'll be interesting to see who actually benefited from the umpires in this game because it was so bad. But you had a run on first and 2 outs. That's like the hardest play in the book to score a run off of when there's a runner on base. So it'll be different if, say, the runner was somewhere else and there were fewer outs. That's why McNeil's home run added as much win probability as it did, because it basically turned a situation where it looked like the Yankees were going to get out of the inning unscathed, to where the Mets flipped the game upside down. If it was in a later inning, it would have been even more clutch, but that's just what it is. The Mets had some big plays at the start of the year as well, and we're going to get into some of those big plays. Looking at Mets versus Marlins, we had some big plays in this game. The Marlins had a 93.2% chance of winning after this ground out, after at one point reached 95.9% chance of a Marlins victory. Alonso hit a 3-run shot to tie it up, but that's 60.2% for the Marlins victory. So that actually only added 33%. Main reason why it didn't add as much as you'd think it would is because the Marlins would still be favored, seeing as they'd have 2 more chances to bat, and the Mets only 1 more chance to bat and respond. Obviously, you had a bunch of big plays. In a coming time after this, the Mets actually added 21.1% percentage points on win probability with an out at the plate. In the bottom of the 8th inning, that took it from a 77.6% chance of a Miami victory to 56.5%. Then, obviously, we had some big strikeouts here, as the probabilities just, you had many plays that added double digits really for both sides in extras. So it was a crazy game. Honestly, if Mets-Yankees, that first one with 3 lead changes, wasn't really the biggest game the Mets have played all year, then it's got to be this game, even though it was in April. Just because of how crazy it became in the later innings. And of course, it was an 11-inning affair. But obviously, 2 on and 2 out is one of the harder plays in the book. Is one of the hardest plays in the book just to tie up the game on. Then when they get to third, but then you have a strikeout and then a fielder's choice to the plate, that really saved the Mets there. And then there's a bunch of plays in the 10th to keep runs off the board, and you have the 11th inning, and that happened. But where we saw an even bigger game was the Mets Blue Jays game on April 5th, which was another big comeback for the Mets. Um, the Mets were down 2-0 after 7 innings. Not the same as 4-1, obviously, but this time it was at home. But we have to realize that there were 2 outs and runners on first and second, and then we had a triple to take the Blue Jays from a 5-6 chance of winning to giving the Mets a 5-8 chance of winning. And 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 that equates to 11 out of 24. When you multiply it by 100, that's like a 45.8% chance of win probability increasing. I think that actually was the correct number. It was like 45.8% chance of it on this triple. You had runners on first and second, but then you had 2 outs. But although it did become runners in first and third after Nimmo lined out, Winker hit a tying triple that could have been an inside the park home run to add even more of a win percentage added. If that was an inside the park home run, the Mets turned to probably jump up to around 80%, and then you see a 60% in win probability. Um, this is a game when the Mets were really generating traffic on a base paths the whole game, but they came away with nothing, so they were down 2-0. But there was always a chance the Mets could come back and win, and that's what happened, generating more traffic in the bottom of the ninth to eventually walk it off on a sac fly, but that only added about 19% of win probability. And that's what you gotta understand. A game-winning sac fly is like 19% added from 81 to 100. When it's a run on third and 1 out, if it's 0 outs, then you gotta figure it adds only about 7% from 93%, and then getting a runner to third base actually would be more clutch. That's just how the probabilities work. I mean, you had a triple on 2 outs, but the Mets did nothing with it. A leadoff double, and the Mets do nothing with it. Both by Jesse Winker. Lindor got a leadoff double and went to third base, but then the Mets did nothing with it in the first. In the seventh, the Mets loaded up the bases, but then came away with nothing. So the Mets were generating traffic on the base paths all game in this game, and left 8 on base. Blue Jays somehow left more on base, but look at where the Mets put them in scoring position, and that also will tell you the story of this game. Now, the Mets did have 2 walk-off plays that really could be considered highly clutch. One of them was against the Cardinals on the 18th of April. One of them. And the reason why this one is because it was a walk-off home run. So the Mets' probabilities, really just went up, seeing as there was 64% chance of a Mets victory before then, and Lindor made 100% with his walk-off shot. So that would add 36% of win probability. Higher than the Pete Alonso play. Higher than Pete Alonso tying 3-run homer. But less than either the McNeil home run or the McNeil home run or the lower than the McNeil home run in the Subway Series game, or the Jesse Winker game tying triple against the Blue Jays. The Cardinals actually really had arguably, an equally clutch play. That their percentages went from around 11.5% up to 46.6%. So they went up by 35.1%. So almost as much when Donovan hit a home run in the top of the ninth. But of course, the Cardinals wound up losing the game, so it doesn't really matter in the long run. The Mets also had a big play when Torrens hit a go-ahead double to take the win probability from 61.4% to 90%. That probably isn't going to be considered one of the most clutch plays of the year just because the win probability added on it. was only 28.6%, but that's something to keep in mind that you really had big play after big play in in this game. Now the Lindor home run came on 0 outs. I suppose the only way you make it more clutch is if Lindor was doing this when there were already 2 outs. That probably is the only way to get like bigger. It's very tough for a home run to really be a walk-off home run to really be the most clutch play when there's nobody on base and it's a tie game. It would have to be like a runner on base when you're trailing in order for it to really be that clutch. On the same homestand, they had a huge play, a walk-off play on April 23rd that could potentially be considered more clutch. The Phillies actually took a 73.3% chance of winning the game. Both the Mets and Phillies hit 2 run shots, but the win probabilities on those added. Or not 2 run shots. This was not 2 run shot. The win probability on that was like only about 20%. But the Phillies do take a 73.3% chance of winning the game when they have a runner on third, a bases loaded, and 1 out. However, the Mets generate some traffic on the base paths. 61% chance of winning with runners on first and second, and 2 out, and then Marte walks it off. That's a 39% win probability. That's probably the Mets' most clutch walk-off because even though there was the aspect of there was a runner on second, so there was a runner in scoring position, there was only 1 out, and Marte isn't exactly the best batter either. Alonso did hit a game-tying double, so I'm curious to see what the percentages on that were. But you know what? Percentage on that wasn't actually as high as I would have thought. Um, there was one other Mets walk off that did involve an actual base hit. So we'll get to that. You have Mets Nationals June 10th, and this is the game. Um, but that was still a base hit with a runner on second and no one out. So that only added 19.2% chance of win probability. And since the Mets tied up on 2 plays, you can really tell that you were never getting too much win probability on this. This one leveled out here, so I'm not sure how accurate it is. I think the strikeout didn't add as much win probability as they say it did, so I'm not going to really mention it because sometimes ESPN's can be broken on this. But to be down 4-2 after 7 and then win is pretty impressive. Remember though, clutch plays don't have to always be on the offensive side of the ball. They can be on the defensive side of the ball. And the Mets Rockies game had 2 really clutch plays. You had the Rockies. They were looking at an 82.6% chance to win, tie 2-2, bases loaded, no one out. Well, and we'll get to that. And there were a bunch of other clutch plays in this game made before. Alonso's double added. About it took the Mets from a 46.5 to a 78.3% chance of winning. So Alonso's double added 31.8% chance of win probability, which is almost as much as his 8th-inning home run when it is in the 7th as a go-ahead. But then the Rockies tied up the game. You had an 82.6% chance of winning, Brett Beatty's double play takes the Rockies to a 51.9% chance of winning the game. So this play added, added 30.7 percentage points of win probability for the Mets, as it was now 2 outs and runners on those first and second. Lindor's 2-run double. This was one of the biggest plays to make it from 2-2 to 4-2, and I believe it was on 2 outs. 52% and 93.7%. That added, the win probability that it added for the Mets was 41.7%. Keep in mind, it was a pinch hit thing too, because he was injured in the previous game. So he really added a ton of win probability for the Mets on one swing. Because you had to realize that before that, you had runners at first and third, but you had 2 outs. The double play, again, he had it from bases loaded, no one out, to first and second, and 2 outs. So that was a huge play. Of course, the Mets have been on losing ends of these big plays before. We saw it in the on the defensive side. We saw the Mets Cubs. We saw a real just back-breaking double play. Mets Twins. We saw Twins really get a bunch of clutch double plays at the same time. So this really can go both ways. It can. Can absolutely go both ways. And we've, really seen it on both sides, but this is just sort of where we're at now.